Good morning, everyone all around the world. Today we are presenting our webinar in the Employers Thematic Committee. The committee is the Vocational Training and Skills Development, which is under the umbrella of EBSOMED project, which is funded by the EU Commission and implemented by BUSINESSMED. Today we're having distinguished guests from different entities and different countries around the Mediterranean. We are having Mr. Rabih Sabra, the Director General, Chamber of Commerce and Industry and Agriculture of Beirut, Mont Lebanon. Didier Gilbert from the European Training Foundation. It will be followed also by our expert, Dr. Busain Al-Asadi, and then we will be moving to another session of employers debate. We're having with us Mr. Andre Negrino from AIP Foundation from Portugal, Mr. Mustafa Bakouche from Tunisia, Utica, and myself from the Federation of Egyptian Industries. Starting the day from Lebanon with Chamber of Commerce, Industry, Agriculture of Beirut, Mont Lebanon. I believe all of you have seen different biographies from our speakers. From Mr. Rabih, actually some words have drawn my attention, especially when it's related to the lifelong learning, innovation and investment, and also working with different development partners and donors, dealing with different countries such as the Italians, Saudis, Algerians in business councils. That would give us a hint concerning our topic today, the TVET and skills development with different flavor. Mr. Rabih, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Well, good morning. I'm pleased to welcome you all to this important webinar, which comes within the context of the Employers Thematic Committee on Skill Development and Vocational Training, and which is organized in the framework of EBSOMED project, where the Beirut Chamber is an active partner. As you already know, the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic has tremendously disrupted the education sector and labor market in every part of the world, with direct effects on technical and vocational education and training. To help repair the economic and social damages caused by the pandemic, the EU has set a recovery plan where TVET was identified as a priority sector for sustainable competitiveness, social fairness, and resilience. This webinar will address the challenges and opportunities of the TVET sector in the Euro-Mediterranean region in light of the late developments and the COVID-19 crisis, and speakers will tackle issues related to the activities of the Employers Thematic Committee and best practices in TVET. Throughout my intervention, I will tackle issues related to vocational training and skills development in Lebanon with a rapid overview on the major challenges, the possible opportunities, and the role of the private sector with a focus on the Beirut Chamber initiatives. Over the years, the TVET sector in Lebanon has accumulated numerous deficiencies, which are grouped under three main headings: access and service delivery, quality and relevance, and governance and systems. Under the access and service delivery, TVET faces three main challenges. First, the reluctance of students and families to enroll in TVET due to the lack of decent job opportunities, the mismatch between youth expectations with TVET salaries and working conditions, the lack of clarity in the acquired competencies, and the need for improved testing and certification mechanisms. Other constraints include the failure to adopt horizontal and vertical pathways and modular courses, and the absence of career guidance in most TVET schools. The second challenge under this deficiency heading is the lack of inclusiveness to women and persons with a disability. The third and final challenge is associated to the weak infrastructure of TVET institutions and their incapacity to keep up with the requirements of employers and the changing needs of the labor market. The second deficiency is the weak of quality and relevance of TVET to labor market demand, outdated curricula, absence of unified qualification standards, lack of systemic participation of the social partners, limited information on the labor market, inadequate accreditation system, and quality assurance mechanisms. On the level of human resources, TVET suffers from a shortage of qualified trainers, especially in competencies that are demanded in the labor market, and the absence of sufficient supervision and guidance. The third main deficiency in Lebanese TVET is associated to governance and systems, where no common priorities exist due to the weak interinstitutional coordination, absence of a centralized approach in financing and management that lacks cost efficiency. The third important challenge is the absence of a systemic inclusion of the private sector in TVET policies and programs, and the consequent low trust in the efficiency and relevance of TVETs in the eyes of the business sector. The dramatic deterioration of the economic and financial situation in Lebanon and the blast of the Beirut port have seriously affected the state of the TVET in Lebanon and contributed to limiting the public expenditures on this sector. Moreover, the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic has severely disrupted the education and training activities in general, including TVET. The combination of all these factors engendered a fierce recession that led to lowering the pace of the economic activity and hence to a scarcity in job opportunities. An upgraded high-quality TVET system would produce individual and social benefits that encompass the individual, the economy, and society at large. It would contribute to promoting the empowerment of individuals in their future careers and enhance their employability prospects. An inclusive TVET will provide equal opportunities for all, welcoming marginalized populations, women, youth, and persons with disabilities. It also ensures the availability of a competent workforce for economic growth and acts as an incentive for foreign investment. Last but not least, it contributes to inclusive and sustainable development, leaving no one behind. In case a new government is formed, Lebanon Economic Recovery Plan will likely be implemented if the needed structural reforms are applied. In this context, great opportunities for new TVET-related jobs will be offered, but would require the development of new competencies, curricula, and training programs. These potential job opportunities will be associated with the reconstruction of the Beirut port and neighboring part of the city, which were damaged following the explosion, the rehabilitation of the public infrastructures, including roads and highways, electricity, and telecom, in addition to the Beirut airport. Moreover, the exploration of the potential oil and gas deposits in the Lebanese seabed on the Mediterranean will require the availability of a technical manpower from the local market to serve the oil and gas and affiliated sectors, including storage, handling, transport, and logistics. Finally, and considering the innate entrepreneurial and creative skills of the Lebanese people, the substantial development of Lebanese startups, namely those operating in ICT, offers great opportunities for future TVET jobs. However, and in order to enhance the state of the TVET sector in Lebanon, policymakers must focus on improving the TVET image and modernizing the related programs on a sustainable basis to encourage youth integrate the TVET schools. This should embrace continuously updated curricula, train the trainers, introduce new TVET programs to keep up with the emerging sectors, modernize the technical resources, promote apprenticeship and dual programs, and bridge the TVET students and graduates with companies in need of their skills. The Chamber of Beirut and Mount Lebanon, as a representative of the Lebanese private sector, deeply believes in the importance of TVET education in upholding and upscaling the national productive sectors. Therefore, strengthening the partnerships between the TVET and the private sector to revamp the outdated curricula and anticipate the manpower qualifications is of extreme importance. The Chamber hence assists in enhancing and adapting the TVET programs based on the market needs, works on reducing the skills gap between supply and demand on the labor market. Over the last decades, the Beirut Chamber has collaborated with various European and international organizations on TVET-related projects and initiatives that fall under the UN SDGs, especially those associated to enhancing economic growth, promoting the culture of governance and responsible business, preserving the environment, fostering human development, encouraging the gender equity and decent work. In the context of its extensive collaboration with the European Training Foundation, ETF, the Chamber has conducted employer surveys to identify the skills needs in TVET occupations. The second pilot employer survey showed that despite the critical situation in the country, about 1/5 of companies were likely to recruit new workers, particularly medium and large companies. The most needed occupational profiles were sales and marketing specialists, machine operators and mechanics with good communications and foreign languages skills. The survey also showed that employers rely on personal contacts or online means to find workers and not on support from the public employment agency or contacts with education institutions. Finally, about half of companies provided further training to their workers, pointing to a high need for staff skills update and upgrade. The Beirut Chamber has recently partnered with the International Finance Corporation of the World Bank Group in order to develop the Mashriq Gender Facility, a peer learning platform across members of the Chamber to raise their capacity and awareness regarding women's participation and economic empowerment. Moreover, in the context of the European Neighborhood Instruments cross-border cooperation, the Chamber is a key partner in two strategic funded projects, EuroMed and Intermediation, that aim at supporting needs, especially youth and women, in upgrading their skills and creating job opportunities in port logistics and digital-related occupations. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rabeh. That was an inclusive overview about the current situation in Lebanon. Our thoughts and prayers are for Lebanon to overcome this crisis. Thank you very much for your presentation. Now we're coming to the second presentation and overview from Mr. Didier Gilbert, a senior specialist in private sector engagement in VET and country coordinator, Armenia Operations Department, European Training Foundation. Mr. Didier, the floor is yours. I want to remind all the audience that simultaneous translation is available in English and in French. If you have any questions, please post it in the below box. Thank you, Mr. Didier, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Shaima. Can you confirm that you can see my PowerPoint?
Yes, I do confirm.
Okay. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much, BUSINESSMED, to invite the European Training Foundation to contribute to this important thematic webinar. As you've said, Shaima, I am Didier Jalibert, and I work for the European Training Foundation as a specialist of private sector engagement in VET. So I'm going to talk about the ETF activities in South and East Mid region. And first, I would like just to introduce, yes, it works, the European Training Foundation. So the ETF is an agency of the European Union that support the country from the neighborhood in the reform of the education and training system. And it's done in line with EU external policies. In order to achieve its objectives, the foundation may provide assistance to partner country in facilitating adaptation of to the industrialized changes, or in improving initial and continuing vocational training, in facilitating access to vocational training, in stimulating cooperation on training between educational establishment and firms, in developing exchanging of information about experience in issues common to the training system of the member states, in increasing the adaptability of workers, and particularly through increased participation in education and training in the lifelong learning perspective. And finally, in designing, introducing, and implementing reforms in education and training system in order to develop employability and labor market relevance. And I think that what Mr. Rabi Sabra presented, you can see also how the ETF is working. And I would like just to mention the four main activities, what we do. So we are working in the activity of improving skills. And in this, it means that we're working on digital and online learning. We support in qualification. Our expertise is also in teacher and training, teacher training, and work-based learning. You mentioned, Mr. Sabra, the apprenticeship and dual and internship. It is also in a career guidance. The second action, field of action, is promoting the employability through youth employability. That's our expertise, women and youth entrepreneurship, entrepreneurial learning, small business act assessment, and enterprise skills. The third area, it is making the system work for everyone. And here, our expertise is in governance, policy analysis, and progress monitoring. And here I'm talking about the Torino process, and I will be back later about Torino process. And of course, our expertise is on financing and funding. And finally, the fourth area is working on the global Europe. And here we provide assistance to EU delegations. We advise the EU policymaking. We support the EU institution. And we are also, our expertise is managing recent relationships with international donors. A card so that you can see that the ETF is located in Italy, and you can see all our partner countries from Central Asia, Eastern Partnership, Balkans, Turkey, and all the countries around the Mediterranean Sea. 2020 was a very specific year for everybody, and the ETF has been very involved in mapping the impact of the COVID. What was the impact of the COVID in terms of first of education and training, but also about social and economic context. Of course, we always focus on skills development dimension. What has been done to answer to this shock? What has been done in the country? What were the policy responses? And we have made a regular mapping of in all the country what it happened. By the way, I will forward later the website link about all this survey on the mapping. And we have made also a report on e-learning and digital online learning. We've seen that the COVID has been an accelerator of all what it is was about online and learning. Today, it is one of the consequences also of the COVID, in fact. And then further to this work that we have done, we had some reflection and discussion, of course, internal ETF and external with other agencies and other stakeholders. And it came up two initiatives that has been retained in order to support the partner country in addressing the impact of COVID-19. The first was on active labor market measures, and the second was on skills for enterprises. And all the two issues has just been kicked off. And I'm going to focus on the skills for enterprises. So this, the skills of enterprises initiatives aims at answering and managing the impact of COVID-19 pandemic in terms of skills. But that's the first issue. But also we see in the longer term perspective, it's to contribute to three areas that has been identified as major in the longer term. It is to the greener, inclusive, and innovative society. That's the three main issue. And let's see what are the objectives of the skills for enterprises. First, it's just to promote through intermediary bodies. So we just had the Chamber of Commerce of Beirut, but also I think that later we're going to have a sectoral association. So through intermediary bodies, the central role of skills, that in supporting the companies, whatever the size, could be mid-cap, but also SMEs and micro company, that in their recovery and also in the perspective of future competitiveness, and with through just what I've said about regarding three main area, it is inclusiveness, innovation, and greening. The second objective of the Skills for Enterprises initiative, it's to provide a platform for international exchange. In fact, it is building a network where you can share, a network where we can be inspired, a network where we can learn, and all of this and creation of a support of development that will be done through policy guidance, but also to support the transformation of enterprises. And here in this perspective, we are talking about upskilling and reskilling. That has been already mentioned by our previous guest. I would like to underline what has been done this year, because it sounds of the current issue, and it will be continued next year. Together with the country and the country stakeholders and the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the EBRD, the initiative, we launched a study to detect how innovative companies in agribusiness sector in Egypt, Georgia, Morocco, Serbia, Turkey, Ukraine, and Uzbekistan have put in place inclusive skills, strategy, and practices to enhance their resilience in dealing with the pandemic, and how skills have supported the required changes. That was a study. That study is not finished, it's going to continue next year, as we're going to see. But also, we had a joint report with UNIDO and the ETF on the changing needs for skills development as a result of the pandemic, based on a global survey of business launch in 2020, that concludes that alongside skills development, reskilling and upskilling are gaining importance in the transition to a more digital, inclusive, and green society. That's the issue, what we've done. And also, we have done the first peer learning event online. Next year, what about next year? First, we're going to finalize the EBRD study I just mentioned. But also, we're going to map, implement a mapping about the skills dimension. It means that the mapping will be the opportunity to identify what are the initiatives that has been set in the country of the neighborhood in order to promote skills for supporting company strategy. That will be, and the mapping has just been started yesterday, in fact, and all the country will be screened, and we're going to have this information. So it will be very useful because through the mapping, we're going to have an idea of what has been done in terms of skill for supporting the companies to answer to the COVID crisis. And of course, we will see further than the COVID, because the COVID is an issue we have to answer, but we have to go ahead. Then we work always by identifying good practice, what has been done. Next year, and it was, I just mentioned the second objective, that's a network building with the identification of core member and good practices. And finally, the third issue would be we would like to support innovation, but we want to talk, we want to implement knowledge sharing. So we're going to do international events and a country level targeted dialogue, and also an hackathon in October 2021. Now let's go to ETF and in the region. I talked before about the Torino process. It is our flagship. The Torino process is an evidence-based study on the vocational education training and labor market situation in the country, that it is carried out each 2 years to check how is the situation regarding the VET system and the labor market. It has been carried out last year in all the country, and priority has been identified at a regional level for BUSINESSMED. And I would like just to share the 4 issues. The finding and the recommendation of the ETF Torino process regional report provide, in fact, elements to inform policy dialogue and also future regional initiative within the Southern and Eastern Mediterranean area. The structural changes need a systemic approach for reform, and the skills development system in CEMED region need to undergo a true shift of paradigm away from an inclusive focus on formal provision and one-size-fits-all solution toward lifelong learning system that can offer flexible, individualized pathway for each learner, combining formal and informal learning, hard and soft skills, and to ease access, education, and training. So if we're looking about build a stronger partnership at national level, the central authorities in charge of skills development should consider the social partners as full factor of the policy cycle and not as a host to consult it casually for a specific issue. That's one priority. The priority also, it is on the sectoral level. There is a real need that has been identified to setting up skills council in strategic sector in CEMED region. Regarding the VET financing, it is about developing an agreed costing methodology, but also to diversify the source of funds and toward a more performance-oriented approaches for the resource allocation. The second pillar of the priorities is about lifelong learning. In fact, the technological transformation in general and the digital and green transition in particular call for a more agile and responsive skills system. Company needs to reskill their staff. We can see that the evolution is very quick, and we can talk also with the means with the digitalization. So it means that the lifelong learning, it's very quick. I worked before in the automotive industry, and I can tell you that some people, when they were qualified, with the rapid change, 3 years after the qualification, the technology were going very fast. They had to re-qualify because the technology was so fast that they couldn't follow up. That's a very important issue. The third pillar, it is about skills provision and how we can help, that the priority should be to ease the transition from school to work. And considering there is a study that changing needs for skills development, that was a result, and I was talking about that, the COVID-19, it is a UNIDO ETF 2020, and the COVID-19 is pushing the company in fact, to explore future needs. And the companies identified clearly, and they expressed the need for a workforce with different skills in order to cope with COVID-19 challenges. In the workforce with different skills, and in all 40%, I'm just looking about that 40% of the companies stated that they need different skills, the change of need of different skills to cope with the COVID-19 challenges. And of these, 60% also expect a change to their production process. So the company expressed the fact that the staff should change their skills, but also they will change their business model and the production process. A very important issue about the transition, it is about the fact that the establishment of a career guidance will ease the transition. But one of the key issues for to be closer to the company needs, it is a work-based learning apprenticeship, and that's a key issue, and it is high in the agenda of the partner country. But for in the region, the regulation and the extension of work-based learning, it seems to be a priority, and also to work on the key competencies like digitalization and entrepreneurship. Finally, what about the data, the fourth pillar that comes up from the Torino process issue? That's the policy. We've seen that the policymakers, employers, workers, all the provider education need timely and accurate information about demands for skills on labor market and how it relates to skills supplies. Given that the speed at which labor markets are changing, the skills need identification become even more key to address the skills mismatch, skills gap. And also that's for addressing the unemployment and underemployment in all the CMED countries, independently of their level of economic development. So the data are a key issue for implementing a policy. What are the contribution of ETF to reform at the regional level? So we're working. I'm going to present as a typology. First, there is the monitoring. So each year there is a contribution on education and employment trends and policies that's produced on a yearly basis and for all the country, and it is published in ETF website. There is also what I've said, that the Torino process already said that it is evidence-based analysis of human capital development issues and bed policies. That's monitoring that helps, and that's how we can support the countries. Then there are activities such as facilitating of peer learning. And for example, there is the ETF Forum on Quality Assurance in BED that has been launched by the end of 2017, and that fostered the exchange and peer learning among countries in the South, but also set on issue linked to quality assurance in BED. And I think that this year also it will concern Eastern Partnership. That's how we can contribute to the reform at the regional level. And finally, the contribution to the policy dialogue at the regional level, the contribution to the ongoing discussion on the follow-up of the Ministerial Declaration of Employment and Labor, and sharing and networking with the regional partner, and that we are talking about Union of Mediterranean, but also UNIMED, EBRD, GIZ, Enabel. We support also the support to the European Commission, DG NEED, to provide content and methodological advice to the implementation of the YEM project. That YEM, it is a youth for employment in Mediterranean, and that it is due to an end in December 2020. So we're almost at the end. Check. And to be on time, I would like to talk about the upcoming initiative and study report for 2021. First, there will be the Torino process regional report for the Southeast Med region. I already mentioned a few information about the priorities that came up in the Torino process report, but it's not, it's about to be finalized. That will be the first main issue. The second support dedicated to the region will be the Torino process regional event. That will be the opportunity to discuss the finding. All the countries around the table, that will be discuss what are the findings and how it should be implemented, etc. It is scheduled in April 2021, and it is a TBC to be confirmed because, of course, in the current time, it's complicated just to be firm on this. The third issue is about the COVID-19 impact on education and training employment in CEMED region. That's in January 21. There will be we will provide a survey, a report on this issue. We will, I will provide the link and how to get this information. And finally, untapping, that it is mentioned, the potential of use in CEMED region, that it is in course of finalization, but the results as already presented last week in the Business and EBSOMED webinar that has been organized. So, and for finishing, I would like just to show some example of what has been done in the country. I won't talk about all these activities, but it gives the idea of how we can support in the region, how it is done, what we have done to support the countries and the stakeholders in the region. So if you want to have more information, you can go on our website. There is also Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn. There is an open space where you can have. So I would like to thank you. I want to say that for me, it's very important to also to support and to make a contribution in the framework of private sector intermediary bodies. So to intervene and to support the BUSINESSMED, it's a signal, it's a clear signal about how we consider the private sector. And that's, so I would like to thank you so much. I hope that I'm on time because I don't have any clock. Thank you. Back to you, Shaima.
Thank you very much, Didier. Actually, you've pushed very important buttons that are very common in all the countries and in our member countries of BUSINESSMED in specific. Career guidance, lifelong learning, quality assurance. It's very common, and that's why now we are coming to a very important part of our webinar, which is presenting what our expert, Dr. Busaina Lasadi, has done during the previous period. Dr. Busaina is a consultant on TVET policies and expert of our committee, Vocational Training and Skills Development. She will be presenting the mission of this committee, the purpose of the study, presentation of the first results of the study and the fact sheet, sharing country experiences and best practices of TVET, and maybe sharing with us also some challenges that she faced during her first phase of study. I've seen from her biography that she's having a very deep experience in TVET, not only in our member countries of BUSINESSMED, but also in different regions like Yemen, Tunisia, Libya, and in different sectors as well, like the agribusiness, ICT, education, fisheries, and health. So we're very eager to hear from you, Busaina. Now the floor is yours. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Shaima, for the presentation. I will time to make sure that I'm not exceeding the time because I have so many things to say. Although I think the previous speakers, Mr. Gilbert and Mr. Sabra said so many interesting things, and some other things that they have already said will be repeated in this presentation because basically they tackled the most important issues in the VET sector and in the skills development area. So I would like to start off by outlining the presentation. I will briefly talk about the purpose of the study, and I will explain why we are focusing on the vet sector in the MENA region and in the southern Mediterranean countries in particular. I will talk about the major findings from the desk research that we have conducted recently. I will describe the theoretical framework that we designed to conduct an assessment of the selected northern and southern countries. In the final part of the presentation, I will briefly discuss the role of business services associations in engaging the private sector. I will also briefly talk about COVID-19 impact on the vet sector and try to enumerate some possible responses. And we'll conclude with some recommendations and remarks, and hopefully some of them will be discussed after the presentation. To start with, the purpose of the study is to explore ways to improve the vet development opportunities in the region and reduce skills mismatch in the labor market to be able to boost business productivity and competitiveness and positively impact on economic growth and job creation. It also aims to support the 2030 agenda for sustainable development, mainly SDG 4 on quality education and SDG 8 on decent work and economic growth. The study includes an update on the situation of the vet sector in the MENA region with a focus on southern Mediterranean countries. It includes the first part. Of course, it has many parts, and we are concluding the first phase where we focused on a desk review of recent studies in the vet sector. Out of this desk review, we tried to come up with a comparative analysis to extract major trends in the vet sector and design a theoretical framework that enables us to assess the vet models of northern and southern countries and conduct a comparative analysis to underscore the best practices. The study also includes an investigation of the possible roles of other stakeholders, mainly business services associations, and what BSOs can play to promote as a role to promote private sector engagement in the vet sector and strengthen labor market linkages between employers and the workforce. So first of all, I would like to answer the question why we are focusing on southern Mediterranean countries in the MENA region in this study, and why we're talking about vocational education with a focus on the MENA region and southern Mediterranean study. First of all, because when comparing the MENA region labor market demographics with other regions, we realize that MENA is an exceptionally controversial region. I would like to take you through some labor market demographics based on recent figures published by United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Western Asia in February 2020. And if we focus on three particular variables that include the number of youth, the unemployment rate, and the number of NEET in the region, we can conclude or we can observe the following. So figure 1 shows that how the Arab countries in particular, or the Arab region, continues to be one of the most youthful regions in the world. It has witnessed a dramatic increase of the number of children and youth. If we focus on those aged below 24 years old, they increased from 139 million in 1980 to around 216 million today, making up about 50% of the region's population in 2020. This number is projected to increase to more than 245 million by 2030. So youth aged 15 to 24 years old make up almost 70% of the population of the Arab countries, or close to 74 million people. And the size of youth population is expected to grow faster reaching 91 million by 2030. So very, very important variable, a demographic variable to consider for this region, which is a very youthful region, which means a very healthy and qualified workforce to prepare not only for the region, but also with the potential to export worldwide, especially in regions like Europe, where the youth, where we don't have that advantage of having a youthful population. The second variable shows the unemployment rate in the Arab countries. We all know that the progress achieved in education has not been translated to increased employment. Unemployment rates, especially among the youth, are soaring, as we can see from the graph, and are currently the highest in the world, at close to an average of 26%, and ranging between 14% for the Gulf countries, as opposed to 25% in the Arab lowest or least developed countries, 27% in the Mashrek, and 29% in the Maghreb. So unemployment has a gender dimension also, as our colleague from Lebanon talked about. The unemployment rate of young women aged between 15 and 24 years is 75% higher than of young men in the region. And as we know from the statistics on MENA, labor market, statistic on labor market, higher education levels are not a guarantee against unemployment in the region, as reflected in the unemployment rate of university graduates. The third graph illustrates the percentage of youth not in employment, education, or training, which are better known for NEET youth. This is 2020 from February 2020 results from the same source. The estimated number of young people not in employment, education, or training in the Arab region is 21 million, which constitutes close to 1/3 of youth population in the region. However, the global average is 21%. So again, a special and a close interest and focus on NEET youth is very, very important for the stability and the security of the region, to avoid other scenario of uprising as the Arab Spring won. In addition, there is a pervasive gender gap around in the NEET population. As you can see, 19% of young men in the Arab region falling into the NEET group, compared to close to 43% of young women. So not only a higher rate of unemployment for women, but also most of it comes from the NEET category of unemployed women. The final graph translates a little bit what I call this controversial issue in the region. So youthful region, unemployment rate is increasing, a gendered difference, and however, a very weak interest in vocational trainings and vocational paths for youth. Figure 4 shows the number and share of secondary students enrolled in vocational programs. So as you can see, the dark part illustrates the enrollment in vocational programs in youth globally versus region, MENA region or the Arab region divided into male and female. So in the Arab region, there are currently approximately 2.5 million secondary students participating in vocational education, which constitute 12% of all secondary students. And this shows how unattractive the VET sector to youth, although it does not lead to higher unemployment as it is the case for tertiary education. So this is basically a demographic background for to assess the labor market in the MENA region, in the Arab countries, in the Southern Mediterranean countries, to show that this is really a controversial region, and vocational education and skills development is key to be able to prepare the future for the youth and women population in the region. And this, of course, the impact of it on the productivity of the private sector and the development of the economic sectors in these countries. Going back to the study, and according to the desk research that we conducted on the major topics that were raised to tackle the issue of skills development in the vocational education and training sector, are mainly 6 elements. The first one is VET system being a solution to unemployment and skills gap. So we noticed through the desk review that policy papers, research papers, reports on the VET sector keep promoting the VET sector or the VET system as a solution to unemployment and skill gap or skill mismatch. There is no other solution but to focus on promoting vocational education and training because it has many features. One of them is its cost effectiveness and its rapid upskilling and reskilling of youth, and it is tailored to the needs of the increasing youth of the region. The second element in the findings is the funding and reforming of the VET system. And my colleague talked about the importance of the reform that should be considered and deeply considered in the VET sector. Why? Well, also we realized that funding is available, whether it comes from public budget or from donors. But of course, this funding has to be further diversified and has to be relocated and has to be calibrated more effectively to tackle issues related to training of trainers, quality of the training, the infrastructure of the centers, and many other issues that we will be discussing in this presentation. The third element is skills development and skills forecast. And I think Didier talked about the amazing work done by ETF in conducting skills forecast in the region through the Torino process and the reports reviewed on written or reports conducted by the Torino process are very informative in the sense of providing up-to-date information about the situation of the VET sector in the region. Implementation of sound skills forecast system is very important, and it could inform policymakers and VET stakeholders about future labor market skills need. The fourth element that is reviewed in the literature was the quality assurance in the VET. And of course, the existence of an effective quality assurance in the VET sector is important because it provides a constant process that aims at monitoring, evaluating, and learning the best practices in this sector, and also maintaining the quality standards for the sector to develop. The fifth element is policy dialogues, policy papers, and research in the VET system. Of course, we realized that the last decade, many interesting reports and policy papers have been published on the issue. There is also this interagency group on technical and vocational education and training, which is composed of major actors in the vocational education sector, such as ETF, CEDOFOP, World Bank, UNESCO, ILO, to just name a few of them. The fact that they gathered together to sort out issues and tackle major challenges of the VET sector shows that this makes the dynamic around the VET sector. And the sixth element that was also very pronounced and very much encountered in the literature review was putting the VET sector in the digital age, and that has been accelerated by, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic, and how the VET sector seems to be the adequate educational system that can drive the effective skills development of the current and future workforce. by adequately upskilling or reskilling the workforce according to the demand of the future jobs, which are no longer considered as future jobs because they are already here because of the accelerated pace of the pandemic, accelerated pace of the technology caused by the pandemic. So the desk review that was conducted helped us underscore the most important themes that were recurrent in the different reports and studies that we have reviewed. Out of these major topics or tackled in this literature, or the literature that was reviewed, we identified or we tried to come up with a theoretical framework that could help us analyze or assess the VET models in the region and conduct a comparative analysis between the VET systems or the VET models that are working and the VET models that have that are really going through lots of challenges. So we identified, or we based our theoretical framework on 7 elements. The first one is the private sector engagement. And the private sector engagement, so basically what we focus on when using this variable to analyze or to assess a VET model, is to see how much the private sector is engaged in the VET sector through promotion of close collaboration with the VET sector, active participation in the dual system, the increase of apprenticeship opportunities, engagement in the skills development and curricular reform, actively participate in employability events such as job fairs and other employability events, career days, etc. So these could be a positive sign that the private sector is engaged in the vocational education system. The second variable is the public expenditure and existing forms of funding. Of course, some countries prioritize and calibrate donors' funding agenda to the development of the VET sector. And we are going to give examples of southern countries and northern countries who have done that. The use of VET funding to rebuild the VET infrastructure and align it with technological needs. This is also a sign that the VET sector is being aligned according to the needs of the labor market. And the development of new curricula that respond to the economic sector skills need and what it requires from training of trainers and upskilling of the instructors and the VET administrators. The third variable, which is the governance of the VET sector, of course, a strong governance model and a strict leadership to oversee the VET system and govern, control, and monitor the implementation of its strategic plans is very important. However, the idea is to establish an effective coordination mechanism to follow up with the development of the VET system. And I think my colleague already talked about the governance issue and how to adopt a solid vertical and horizontal coordination to effectively improve performance in the VET policy making and policy implementation. And I think there are interesting examples of what we call collective governance, where it is not a top-down, it is not a bottom-up, but it's really a collaborative effort from multi-stakeholders engagement in this process. So the fourth element or variable is the quality assurance. And the idea is how to, or how the VET model conduct monitoring, evaluation, and learning provisions to set up quality assurance standards and adhere to best practices related to the VET quality assurance. So of course, the idea is not to be part of a quality assurance model and sit in these boards and decision-making committees, but basically come up with an implementation plan to be able to monitor effectively what's going on in the VET sector. The fifth variable, labor market intermediation mechanisms. This is a very important issue, and Didier touched upon this. It basically includes employment service interventions that are designed and implemented to boost job seekers' employability and accelerate their labor market insertion. So it could vary from things such as career development centers to employability events like job fairs and career days, to other labor market intermediary mechanisms that promote this labor market linkages between the various stakeholders in the employability, in the vocational education sector. So these mechanisms are essential in enhancing labor market information systems because they facilitate, or they are able to facilitate, information sharing about existing employment opportunities, including skills types and levels of job seekers, etc. The sixth element is the attractiveness of the VET sector and its image amongst youth and society. And we know that this image has to be improved, especially in the southern countries, where in the southern Mediterranean countries and the Arab region, and the MENA region in general, well, there is a tendency to opt for a tertiary or academia path rather than a vocational path. However, in northern European countries, we've seen that a very effective communication and outreach and dialogue has effectively improved the image of the vocational education path. So this is also a variable that we use to assess to what extent the VET model is really effectively being implemented. And the last variable is skills development and skills forecast. Of course, some countries put in place a skill forecast mechanism and labor market information system in place, which are updated regularly. However, some countries do not do that. Therefore, they are lagging behind information regarding needs of economic sectors and the future jobs, etc. So briefly, I tried to go through the framework that has been again created based on what is being discussed and analyzed in the vocational education area. And these 7 points are used to assess each VET model in the region. And if we see that one of these elements are not well used, are not up to date, are not effectively implemented, therefore we consider that a lot has to be done in order to improve the VET sector or the VET model in the country. Of course, this framework has been used or implemented to assess two types of countries or where the VET model is being implemented. Countries like the Swiss model, the German model, the Dutch model, the Canadian and Australian model, just for the sake of discussing in the presentation, but the focus was on European examples. The dual model was closely screened, and of course the 7 variables that I've been discussing were very well described and scored, if you like. Of course, we try to highlight the strength and the impact of the employability of youth and the strong matching between the skills demand and the skills supply in countries where the dual system is implemented. Also, donor-funded pilot projects led by major donors like EU and World Bank, etc. Are also very good examples to assess. For example, most MENA countries started a process of reform in collaboration with donors. To take an example of Egypt, TVET, where 67 million euros allocated by EU fund to rebuild 3,500 VET centers, enroll 2 million students, engage 150,000 teachers, involve 30,000 SMEs. So this is an example of a pilot project funded by a donor in order to rebuild the vet sector. Tunisia TVET 2030 is also an example. The Moroccan initiative of building 12 cities of crafts and competencies is also an interesting pilot project to promote vocational education in Morocco. There is also the Qudra project in Jordan, which is focusing on IDPs and Syrian and Iraqi refugees. So there are interesting donor-funded pilot projects that basically we noticed that the 7 variables that we were discussing are very much present. But of course, there is a big issue of sustainability, scalability, and the exit strategy of these donor-funded projects. And this is where these pilot projects remain pilot projects, because it's very difficult to scale them up, because sometimes the engagement of the local government is not very much is not strong enough, and also to scale up these projects at the country level or the region level necessitates, of course, bigger funds. And in terms of exit strategy, usually those projects do not put in place a very solid exit strategy to make sure that the project could be sustainable. And this is really the main issues we identified for these pilot projects, because we were wondering why these pilot projects are not sustainable and cannot be scaled up across the country or the region, since they show that the best practices similar to the ones in Northern European countries. The private sector engagement, which was the last point in the best practice, I would like just to focus on the role of BSOs. And these are the elements that we try to discuss in the first part of the study. Of course, the role of BSOs is crucial here because of this close relationship between BSOs and the private sector. So it's really the dialogue that should be set up between vocational education actors, from vet owners, vet directors, vet instructors, vet policymakers and decision makers is or can be facilitated, monitored by BSOs, and they can be there to strengthen this linkage between both stakeholders. So the involvement of BSOs could be in promoting the apprenticeship opportunities among private businesses, because up to today, private businesses don't see why they need to invest time and money in apprenticeship if they don't see a win-win situation. And this is something that needs to be redefined and rediscussed to be able to highlight this win-win situation, as it was the case, for example, in the Swiss model and the Dutch model. Collaboration with TVET stakeholders to develop new curricula tailored to the needs of the private sector. This has already been done, but it remains not sustainable because the curricula keeps or the skills needs keep changing and keep evolving, and the curricula also needs to be continually tailored according to the needs of the labor market. Organization of employability and career events to connect employers with job seekers, this is very important. Involvement in policy dialogue about the importance of the vet sector could be very a role that could be assigned to BSOs. So I just want to make sure that I'm not taking a lot of time on this. So I would like to move to the second part of the presentation, where to talk about, of course, the information that we try to include in the study regarding the impact of COVID-19 on the vet sector. One of the key elements here is how to make sure that there is learning continuity plan in the learning and teaching process. We know that there has been a disruption in the learning process, and to keep the learning continuity plan, of course, through the use of online and virtual learning. But of course, MENA-VET models did not put in place a learning continuity plan for the simple reason that they lack the infrastructure, the qualified workforce, and the budget to do so. However, in northern European countries where the dual system is put in place and the infrastructure is also there, we've seen that the learning continuity plan was put in place very rapidly and very efficiently. The VET sector infrastructure is not very limited to be able to migrate in a very effective way to a virtual online learning mode. So this is for one of the major issues or major impact on of COVID-19 on the VET sector. It's about the learning continuity plan and the inability of some countries to adjust to the special needs of the VET sector, which requires face-to-face practical workshops that are not easily transferable to the online virtual learning modes unless high technology is used, such as virtual reality and artificial intelligence. And we've seen a very interesting model in developed countries. Possible responses to the post-COVID-19 crisis as far as the recovery of, the development of the VET sector is concerned. Of course, engagement with employers and trade unions, because this is an opportunity now that every stakeholder is shuffling their cards, if we say, or redesigning their strategies for 2021 and the post-COVID-19 recovery plan. So it's high time to engage into discussions with the private sector on how to reskill their employers, how to fill in the new positions that the post-COVID-19 crisis will create, and the technology-based labor market will create. And the role of BSOs here is very important to promote this collaboration. Start planning today for changes in the labor market. As we said, this was accelerated by the COVID-19. So it's an opportunity now to start planning ahead, taking into consideration the new elements that will be available in the labor market. Capitalize on the demand for digital and distance offerings. This is also something that has been accelerated by the COVID-19. We've seen that the learning continuity plan was to go online. So why don't we capitalize on this and try to modernize the offerings for the VET sector? Of course, this means to explore options for innovative digital pedagogical approaches, such as simulators, augmented reality, artificial intelligence, which have already been used in countries like Australia, United States, Canada, and some European countries. And also develop important skills needed to mitigate the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. And we've seen in the interesting report of World Economic Forum report on the future of jobs, how the skills, or even the top soft skills, have been changed lately. And we've seen in the top 15 things related to problem solving, critical thinking, analytical research, and things related to high skills that future employees or workforce have to have. To conclude, recommendations that we are discussing, or that we are including in the preliminary study, or the first phase of the study, is that we are advocating for a multi-stakeholders involvement and engagement, private sector, public stakeholders, communities, CSOs. So the multi-stakeholder involvement and engagement is key, whether through national strategies or whether through donor-funded projects, where it's very important to be engaged in, as I said, collaborative and collective governance, and where everybody is involved. sustainability also, and effective exit strategies for donor-funded programs. As I said, we've seen in the desk research and in the examples that we have listed in the study that there are very interested donor-funded pilot projects in the vet sector. But the issue is that it's very difficult to sustain, very difficult to scale up, and very difficult to see the next step once the project exit the country. The attractiveness of the vet sector, we've seen that it's very unattractive for youth and their families, and a massive communication and outreach campaigns is very important to attract youth to the vet sector. We can, of course, take examples of the best practices in the Northern European countries like Swiss and Germany. But of course, it's, as our colleague says, it's not one size fits it all, but we can at least draw some conclusions from these best practices. We keep saying that the private sector investment in the vet sector is also interesting. By this, I mean, there are some initiatives to create these training centers, private training centers, and invest in the vocational education sector. But of course, this does not mean that we are going to create this double speed system like what it happens in the healthcare in the MENA region, where you have private hospitals or private clinics offering top-notch services. However, the public clinics are in a very appalling conditions. The idea is to give, there is an opportunity to upskill and reskill. There is business for those who would like to invest in the private sector, but this doesn't mean that we have to discard the resources that we have, which is the public vocational education system in the MENA country. So I think I'm going to stop here. Thank you very much for your patience, and looking forward to an interesting discussion with the colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Busaina, for such a very interesting presentation and outcomes out of your first phase of study. Actually, thank you for raising important points such as the sustainability of the projects and sustainability of implemented maybe common cooperation between governments, even not only as donors or development partners. For your information, actually the TVET, which was funded by the EU, it has two phases. The first phase was 66 million euros. And actually it's a co-funded project from the EU and the Egyptian government. The second phase is around 112 million, and it's currently going on. The main problem, as you mentioned, is the sustainability and exit strategy of these projects. We were introduced to the dual education, for example, by the German model, Mubarak Call, and it was a very successful model during the implementation of the project. After the end, no, it's not like before. And now we're talking again about a reform of the TVET in Egypt. Thank you also for raising the point of digitalization, because as you know, it's not a luxury anymore. Everyone is talking about digitalization, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, and now we are forced to know and to learn and to use these definitions. In your first presentation, in the first slides, you mentioned the big percentage of youth in the South Mediterranean countries. I feel we should take that as a hope for the future. How to convert this challenge into an opportunity to benefit and to have like a better life for these young people. We have questions for Didier and Busaina from the audience. First, I would like to share Didier's question. Hold on. So the question to Didier from the audience: what are the challenges of lecturers to maintain pedagogy, the right tracks to deliver training using technology?
Yeah. Thank you for the question. I would mention 3 issues. First, to be prepared, that the preparedness to digitalization and technology. We've seen that in a COVID study we've made that for avoiding the disruption and to maintain the continuity of the education continuity, a lot of countries started and invest to implement digitalize or online training. But one of the issues was non-preparedness of the teachers, and that some countries, I have in mind Armenia, that have set a huge program for training the trainer for being able to train with digitalization. The second issue, I would say that it's to work on the educational curricula. You know, it is like when you integrate something different in the pedagogy, you have to prepare the curricula in this way. For example, in apprenticeship or business in general, when you've got these 2 sites for training, the curricula is shaped with a specific pedagogy. You share the learning outcomes. That's the same for if you want to use the technology, and for the lecturer, the challenges is also to prepare and to reshape. That should be done also in the broader perspective, but that's also the educational curricula should be shaped for that. And then I would say also, because behind this there is also the fact that how the teacher, the trainer, and the teacher lecturer are prepared to the technology, and out from the upskilling and reskilling of knowledge itself, it's also to work with the companies. I think that's a big issue. It is how the teacher, the lecturer, can also be involved in VET, of course, in the day life of the company. So they have to visit, they have to be trained in some country. It is scheduled that the companies host the trainer. So that's also the way. That's my 3 main issues. But it is the main issue. It is to be prepared to use digitalization. We were talking about digitalization, and we've seen that in numerous of the countries of the neighborhood that the teachers were not prepared for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Didier. Just want to remind everyone that the regional fact sheet will be published following the webinar on EBSOMED website, and on the chat box you will find the website. Questions for Busaina. How can the collaboration between social partners be put in place to replicate the best practices of successful models, such as the Swiss model, for example?
Thank you, Shima, for the question. So basically, I would say if we're talking about social partners like community services organizations, social partners like business partners like BSOs, and those who are very much engaged with the workforce, engaged with the vocational education instructors, engaged with communities, engaged with families. I think their main role, if they would like to take the best practices of the Swiss model, for example, would be to focus on labor market intermediation mechanisms. So are families and job seekers and youth aware of the future of jobs? Do they know what it means to have strong life skills and employability skills? Do they know how to process labor market insertion after they finish their graduation, whether it's from tertiary or vocational? Do they know what it means to follow a vocational path versus to follow academia path? So all these labor market information system or market linkage aspect is very important, and it seems that there is really a gap between the information available there, and it's as if this information is available for policymakers and researchers in the field. However, if you go and talk to someone who wants to enroll his or her child in an educational system, and you can convince this person that the vocational path is better than the tertiary path, then maybe this person is going to change his or her mind. So I think social partners should focus on this aspect of labor market information system. And there are many tools, and we've seen in the Swiss model, for example, career development centers that could be at the level of the employer, at the level of the educational institution, at the level of the community services organization themselves. We've seen donor-funded projects that these social partners organize workshops for youth to raise awareness of the importance of the vocational path, to conduct training workshops in life skills, in employability skills, to explain what it means to start preparing your professional path right at a very early age. So I think this aspect of which is one of the key aspects that we've discussed in the theoretical framework is something that could be handled at the level of social partners. Of course, I'm answering your question from the perspective of social partners. So I think they can really contribute in making this labor market linkage, in information sharing and information processing, in raising awareness of the importance of the VET sector, and in helping out the VET resume or improve its attractiveness amongst key beneficiaries, which are youth and community and families, of course, because they have to be engaged in this process.
So back to your point that you raised, the percentage of young people enrolled in the TVET education in different countries. In the Egyptian case, I don't believe it's an indicator because from the statistics and numbers, 51% of the students, secondary students, are enrolled in TVET educational system. But why they were or they are enrolled? Because of their grades. So back to the social perception. And also the social perception, when we raise this point, we say we have a very successful model, such as the Don Bosco model in Egypt, who attract so many people, and the registration in this system, it ends in 2 hours only, although they have to pay an amount of money. So I believe it's a matter of the quality of the education they receive in schools. It's a matter of how recognized their certificates and what they are receiving from this educational system. And as you mentioned, the career path that they can continue in. So another question to Didier. How can you predict the labor skills needs for youth with Torino process?
Well, the Torino process is an evidence-based. In fact, it takes stock of a situation. So in the Torino process, it's not the perspective of the skill needs, you know, for youth. It gives trends. It takes situation from the situation of 2 years after, and what are the trends and how it's said regarding the educational system. I think that it's not really the perspective of Torino process to predict the skill needs as such, but it gives the trends of the labor market. It gives the trends of what's going to be the future. That's the perspective. It's you know, it is overarching. It's more big picture than specific information.
Same guest is asking another question. We have concession of facilitation from digital to knowledge access. Is that e-learning the right solution, and how to apply for capacity building to government and private sector?
Okay, no, it's not the solution. It's not the magic stick. It's not that, but it is one of you know, one of a tool. That's very interesting because in pedagogy, in fact, you've got, I know that you are conscious of the facilitation from the digital learning, but digital learning and pedagogy is one of the issues. So it could be blended learning. You can have you can have on-site, online. You can also, of course, you've got the work placement. that all these issues, and also you can have behind even the job shadowing. So digitalization is not a magic stick, but it is one issue. And in fact, we are talking a lot about this because of the COVID. So, and I like what has been said by our colleague about the accelerator. That COVID has been an accelerator. So now where it's put in the front line, we all talk about digitalization and all this technology, but it is not the only one. And there are some, also we have to say that there are some limits, for example, that all these practices, there are some practices that can't be fulfilled with digital and online learning. When you prepare to be a butcher, when you prepare to be a baker, when you prepare to be a car repairer, you have to practice. That with online, there is a limit. Of course, there are some virtual internship programs that it exists for some profession. That's an issue. That's an issue. So for me, the answer about digitalization, it is yes, it can be used, but it should be it's a mixture. It should be a complement. It should be that, but it can't be just only one issue. And sorry, when you give me the floor, I'm too talkative. But also, we've seen in our survey that there are many complaints. The people, it could be student, but learner, and that there is many complaints because just in front of their screen. But it is like us. When we are just in front of the, there is, you know, a fatigue, and that's also why it is not the magic stick. So I think that the pedagogy should take into account, but should not be, you know, we are not just shifting from one model to another. We are talking about the new normal. No, we can't shift. Do you agree? Do you want to have this world just only online? I like it because today we can be all around the world together, but sometimes you need the proximity and the social contact. So that's my view from this issue.
I like it too, but not that much because I really miss the human contacts. So the common question to our wonderful expert, Busaina, what will be the second phase of the Thematic Committee study and who will be the involved stakeholders?
Okay, thank you, Shaima. Well, I think, first of all, just a note on your comments, I agree that enrollment of youth in the MENA region and the Arab countries in particular, Egypt is among the top ones. But the percentages that the recent figures that I used represent the average. And but if you take example of Jordan, for example, Tunisia, Morocco, maybe at a less point, the enrollment in vocational education is really very limited as a path. But I agree with you, and this is I think thanks to the many reform projects that Egypt went through. Among them, the EU projects that I listed, and I focused on the phase one, and you mentioned phase two, which is even bigger and larger. And also we're talking about 3,500 vocational centers that have been created, and thousands of instructors being trained. So, of course, this explains why the Egyptian TVET system is developing and increasing, in addition to the types of jobs offered by the Egyptian economy that is creates more vocational jobs rather than jobs that require tertiary education. So I think it's a very interesting labor market environment where a good example of a TVET system that is developing and is trying to provide sustainable jobs for its youth to follow. So I agree with you. However, I think the figures were giving an average of what's going on in the Arab countries, especially Gulf countries, countries like Yemen, for example, Libya, where vocational education is really very, is unattractive for youth and families. Back to the question, second phase. Well, the second phase will focus on the quantitative analysis of this topic. So we designed 3 different questionnaires for BSOs, for vet stakeholders such as instructors and vet directors and vet experts. And a questionnaire, the 3rd one, is for employers. So these questionnaires focus on skill development, engagement in the vocational education sector. And through these questionnaires, we are going to gather the viewpoints of different stakeholders on the importance of the vocational education sector and the importance of skills development to increase the skills mismatch in the labor market. So it's going to be a focus on quantitative analysis, which will further confirm the results of the desk review that we have conducted in the first phase.
Thank you very much, Busaina. If we
You're
don't
welcome.
have more questions, I think we can move to the next part of our webinar, which is the employer debate. We are always debating, and the first debate will be that my colleagues will be speaking in French, so I have to hear the translation. In this part of our webinar, we have Mr. André Marino, the Deputy Chairman of AIP Foundation Portugal, which is the Portuguese Industrial Association Foundation. Mr. André is responsible for the strategic programs of the AIP Foundation, and he is also namely strategic program of university industry interaction, which is related to education. And he is also responsible for business modernization and social cohesion. As you can see from his biography, actually, I always have say the words that catch my attention, that he is the signatory of several specialized articles, and he is the one in charge of skills and jobs, industry 4.0, and he is also the vice president of the Portuguese Council of the European Movement since 2013. We have also on this panel Mr. Mustafa Bakoush, University Business Relationship, Employment, Vocational Training, Tunisian Confederation of Industry, Trade and Handicrafts. Mustafa has a rich experience working with University Business Relationship, Employment, Vocational Training within the Tunisian Confederation of Industry, Trade and Handicrafts, UTICA. And the catchy words, entrepreneurship, training, and so many vocational related issues. Mustafa, André, I'm very much welcoming you in this part of our webinar, the Employers Debate, to give an overview about the TVET, whether it's currently happening in your countries, or to have like comments on the study that was shared by Busaina. André, you have the floor.
D'abord, bonjour à tous. Merci pour l'invitation pour partager avec vous quelques idées et quelques problématiques. Ici en Portugal, on est engagé qui constituent des défis très importants pour nous, pour notre industrie, pour notre économie, pour les entreprises. Écoutez avec attention tout ce que les antérieurs orateurs ont dit. Sur cette matière, normalement, on est d'accord avec la plupart des choses. Les problèmes sont très similaires et partout. C'est vrai que, par exemple, Portugal a des spécificités. Je vais commencer par ici. C'est un pays qui a des problèmes, à des situations qu'on considère quand on parle de cette problématique des qualifications et surtout des compétences. Nous avons un problème disons, de déficit de stock accumulé pour la population avec plus de 45 ans. Et une partie très grande de notre population. Portugal, c'est un pays les plus âgés de l'Europe, avec tous les problèmes que ça pose, parce que ces personnes qui ont plus de déficit de compétences qui sont la majorité de la population qui est dans le marché du travail. On a aussi une situation, disons, de flux, sont les personnes avec moins de 40 ans. Pour ceux-ci, les systèmes d'éducation et surtout de formation donnent des réponses de forme plus facile, plus ciblée, et les problèmes ne se posent pas avec les mêmes questions qui se posent pour la population avec plus de 45 ans. Il faut dire une chose, ça c'est comment partout, il pose des problèmes au système de formation. C'est la première fois dans l'histoire de l'humanité qu'il y a 5 générations dans le marché du travail. Si on voit bien, on a 5 générations dans le marché du travail. Et ça pose des problèmes quelquefois un peu plus complexes comment les systèmes donnent des réponses disons, tailor-made, disons, plus ciblé, plus personnalisé, qui est aujourd'hui nécessaire, et avec une diversité si profonde de générations dans le marché du travail. Un autre un aspect que je vais ici relever pour y apporter pour cette discussion, on constate qu'ici, nous sommes d'accord avec Stiglitz dans son livre qu'il a écrit sur la société de la connaissance, que apprendre, c'est aujourd'hui une des compétences plus importantes pour être dans le marché du travail, pour travailler pour les entreprises. Troisièmement, je vais dire une autre chose quant aux nouveaux défis dans un monde qui ont constaté maintenant dans le contexte de la pandémie, mais ça seulement en passant parce que le problème c'est de fond, tout s'accélère aujourd'hui. Tout s'accélère surtout dans le domaine du digital, comme on constate. Et en constatant tout ça, comment on voit que la forme, la façon de travailler, d'apprendre, la façon comme les entreprises compètent, comme les entreprises vont coopérer, la forme comme nous organisons la plupart des opérations, l'organisation de post-travail. Tout ça change maintenant et va changer plus dans le futur. Dans ce contexte, quelles sont les compétences que les organisations nous dirigeons, les entreprises, on dirige au marché du travail, qu'est-ce qu'on a besoin, qu'est-ce qu'on veut dans les réponses ciblées pour un vaste domaine de compétences qui sont aujourd'hui très importants. Je vais seulement utiliser ici une réflexion qu'on fait au Portugal, et je vais énumérer 4 domaines de compétences qui nous semblent aujourd'hui très importants et que les entreprises veulent avoir disponibles dans l'offre de qualification et compétences. Premièrement, les compétences numériques, naturellement, tout ce qui est lié à des compétences en affaires numériques, compétences pour travailler virtuellement, comprendre le système informatique et les logiciels, compétences en conversation numérique, tout ça. Deuxièmement, les compétences, on peut dire, de pensée agile. Ça veut dire des capacités à assimiler plusieurs différents scénarios, l'innovation, la capacité à assimiler à gérer des paradoxes, ça veut dire concilier des points de vue opposés, capacité d'image globale, ou un troisième domaine des compétences interpersonnelles et de communication, naturellement. La co-créativité, brainstorming, construire des relations avec des parties prenantes, travailler en équipe, y compris des équipes virtuelles, sont développées beaucoup maintenant dans ce contexte pandémique. La collaboration, la communication orale et écrite. Finalement, un quatrième domaine, les compétences, on peut dire compétences d'opération globale, compétences opérationnelles globales, soit les capacités à gérer des divers employés, des différents collaborateurs, comprendre les marchés internationaux, capacité à travailler en plusieurs sites à l'étranger, compétences en langue étrangère, sensibilité culturelle pour les relations interculturelles. Ça veut dire que dans une perspective stratégique, on cherche des disponibilités de compétences qui sont liées à ce que je viens de dire. Et on peut mettre un autre problème ou une autre situation pour notre réflexion. C'est vrai que non, normalement, on regarde pour la situation, la forme qu'elle se présente dans le moment, une sorte de photographie statique. Et dans cette photographie statique, on peut regarder tous ces problèmes, tous les déficits de compétences, tout ça. Mais si on fait une réflexion un peu plus prospective, les problèmes se posent encore avec plus de pertinence. Par exemple, on sait que la transformation digitale, ça veut dire la transformation digitale, la chaîne de valeur des organisations, particulièrement des entreprises, va changer beaucoup dans le futur. Et va changer surtout par la relation dynamique entre, d'un côté, ce qu'on vient de dire, la transition digitale, et d'autre côté, pour un groupe d'autres aspects liés avec la soutenabilité, avec le développement soutenable, le développement durable. Bon, ça nous pose un groupe de défis très importants et qu'on doit réussir en partageant beaucoup de choses, beaucoup d'expériences. Et ça, c'est une question qui vient d'être réfléchie ici, mais qu'on doit s'atteindre plus à cette situation, à ces problèmes. C'est déjà ce que je veux dire. Merci.
Thank you very much, Andre. It's always very important to tackle different experience, especially that our study is focusing on the South Mediterranean countries. So it's very important to have your experience as a North Mediterranean countries. I do have the feeling that all the countries all around the world are facing the same problems concerning the TVET. It's only different levels of suffering, but from what I heard is mainly we are focusing on governance, the good governance, focusing on quality, the quality of the TVET education.
Mhm.
As you know, even in the very developed countries, vocational education is very costly. Vocational education is rapidly changing, and for example, in the engineering sector, even if it's a very developed country, it will not be able to cope to modernize their machines and equipments inside the schools. So it's very important to involve the private sector in this aspect. The third thing is the transition from school to work and the social perception. So we're talking about main points and how we are dealing with these points. Now we are taking it to Tunisia to hear from Mustafa Bakoush, the Tunisian experience and how he is perceiving this topic in Tunisia. Mustafa, the floor is yours.
Bonjour Shaima.
Bonjour, always a pleasure to have you.
C'est un plaisir de vous retrouver tous après tant de temps. Bon, je ne suis pas très en forme aujourd'hui, je suis un peu, j'ai la gorge un petit peu avec un peu de tout, mais ce problème de formation professionnelle, on en parle depuis des années. Alors moi, je vais avoir une vision plutôt orientée entreprise et une vision plus terrain et plus pratique. Alors, pour synthétiser un petit peu tout ça, je vais le synthétiser en quelques mots. Hein, il y en a certains qui ont été cités par Boussaina déjà, et d'autres par les collègues qui sont passés de suite après. Donc, vous avez l'engagement, le financement, l'apprentissage, l'alternance, la gouvernance, la qualité. Mais on a oublié quelque chose qui est très important, en fait, deux choses qui sont l'ingénierie de la formation et l'innovation. Vous m'entendez là tous?
Oui, oui, oui.
Ah, super. Donc, depuis des années, on a essayé de rapprocher les demandeurs d'emploi et les entreprises. Et la formation professionnelle, elle est restée un petit peu entre les deux. Et on s'est rendu compte qu'il y avait pas mal de soucis de communication. Cette interface qui existe entre les deux, elle est souvent rompue, soit pour des raisons sociales, soit pour des raisons économiques, soit pour des raisons d'adéquation entre la formation et l'emploi. Beaucoup de paramètres rentrent en jeu. Alors, comme tous les thèmes, comme tous les axes qui sont traités de nos jours, il va falloir que la formation professionnelle aussi subit son lot d'innovation. Il va falloir être réactif et proactif surtout. Parce que beaucoup de formations qui sont valables, qui étaient valables hier, ne sont peut-être plus valables aujourd'hui et qui ne le seront plus demain. Donc, cette façon de voir la formation professionnelle d'une manière standard, je crois qu'elle est révolue. Et nous, à Tunis, on a essayé d'aborder le sujet autrement. Alors, c'est-à-dire qu'on ne raisonne plus en termes régional, local ou même national. On a décidé de se focaliser sur l'aspect bassin d'emploi, c'est-à-dire que la formation professionnelle doit aller là où se trouvent les bassins économiques. Parce qu'on s'est rendu compte qu'à chaque fois qu'on fait un centre de formation quelque part sur le territoire, on se rend compte que les jeunes, quand ils quittent la formation, qu'ils réussissent leur formation, ils rentrent chez eux. Et donc, la première chose qu'ils font, c'est qu'ils cherchent un travail autour de l'endroit où ils vivent. Et évidemment, 9 fois sur 10, ils n'arrivent pas à trouver de travail. Et de l'autre côté, il y a les entreprises qui sont concentrés dans certaines zones géographiques du pays, qui se demandent pourquoi on n'arrive pas à trouver la main-d'œuvre ou les compétences nécessaires. Donc, à ce niveau-là, c'est très important de raisonner en termes de bassin d'emploi. Ça veut dire qu'on a ciblé, je ne vais pas rentrer dans les détails, sur la Tunisie, il y a environ 4-5 gros bassins d'emploi qui sont en général tous sur la côte et on va former d'abord les entreprises et les formations et les centres de formation professionnelle de manière à ce qu'ils bossent ensemble. Nous avons aussi un partenaire social qui est très actif en Tunisie, donc le rôle des partenaires sociaux est aussi très important. Donc, au lieu de créer ces centres de formation un peu partout et n'importe comment, on va les créer aux alentours de ces zones industrielles ou économiques. Donc, c'est très important de les rapprocher et de manière à ce que les entreprises trouvent juste à côté les compétences dont elles ont besoin. Bon, l'aspect engagement dont j'ai parlé tout à l'heure existe, parce que ce soit toutes les parties prenantes sont prêtes à travailler tout ensemble. Le financement aussi existe. Nous avons pas mal de bailleurs de fonds en Tunisie qui n'attendent que ça, qu'ils soient allemands, qu'ils soient français, anglais, italiens, espagnols. L'Union européenne aussi est à nos côtés. Ils nous encouragent à aller dans ce sens. Et la vision, cette vision, on essaye, on l'a démarré il y a 2 ans à peu près, on essaie de la généraliser un peu partout. Évidemment, on ne peut pas attaquer tout le territoire pour l'instant, mais on a commencé par faire ça dans le nord et l'est du pays. Et on va capitaliser un petit peu sur cette expérience pour essayer de la généraliser plus tard sur tout le territoire. Et nous avons eu beaucoup de soutien de la part de nos partenaires européens. Et donc, l'engagement du secteur privé, il est extrêmement important dans ce sens. Nous avons aussi, toujours dans ce package, l'implication du professionnel dans la gestion des centres de formation. Très importante que les professionnels s'impliquent dans la gestion, dans le management, même parfois dans la formation, et ça facilite énormément l'apprentissage par alternance, qui est l'essence même de la formation professionnelle, de manière à ce que les professionnels, en général, préfèrent garder quelqu'un qui a déjà commencé à travailler chez eux que quelqu'un qu'ils ne connaissent pas du tout. Alors, la mobilisation des acteurs autour de tous ces objectifs va prendre un peu de temps. Après ça, nous avons une structuration qui doit se faire au niveau national, sectoriel et régional. Il y a aussi un transfert des acteurs aux acteurs plutôt de tous les outils, parce que nous avons un certain nombre d'outils qu'on utilise pour mettre en place cette politique. Nous avons aussi une partie suivi et évaluation de la mise en œuvre de ces outils, qui est très importante pour savoir où on en est à tout moment. Et c'est ça qui nous permet, en fait, comme j'ai dit tout à l'heure, d'être réactif et proactif, parce qu'une formation qu'on va démarrer la première année, peut-être que la deuxième ou la troisième année, on n'a plus besoin, il va falloir la mettre à jour, peut-être l'enlever carrément, la remplacer par une autre formation, tout dépend du secteur. Nous avons aussi un axe très important qui est le renforcement du dialogue social avec nos partenaires sociaux. Alors ça, tout le monde connaît un petit peu les conflits sociaux et les problèmes sociaux qu'on a. Je pense que ce n'est pas propre qu'à la Tunisie. Et c'est bien d'avoir d'excellentes relations avec nos partenaires sociaux dans ce domaine pour essayer d'éviter un petit peu les conflits. Donc la gestion des conflits est très importante et on travaille ensemble, d'ailleurs, sur la plupart des projets qui sont en relation directe avec la formation professionnelle. On essaie d'intégrer tous ces résultats dans le dialogue social et diffuser et mettre en œuvre l'outil, en général, parcours, emploi et formation. C'est très important. Donc voilà, l'objectif final, c'est finalement élaborer un schéma de développement des ressources humaines sur le plan, je vais dire, régional, sectoriel et aussi national. Voilà, c'était un petit résumé un petit peu de toute la stratégie qu'on essaie de mettre en place en Tunisie au niveau des organisations, de notre organisation patronale. À toi la parole, Shaima.
Thank you very much, Mustafa. I believe resilience in everything is needed, whether it's in applying the educational system or implementing it, or even for the private sector, how to use the resources. So it's very much needed, resilience. So I think now it's my part. And I would like to start my part by sharing with you some good news. 2 days ago, Egypt, the technical and vocational education system in Egypt has jumped 23 places in the global knowledge index. We were in 103 place and we became on the 80. That means that we are somehow on the right track. We still need to do a lot, but we are improving on that aspect. If we raised the points that we mentioned before, whether it's the quality, the transition from school to work, or governance, actually the Federation of Egyptian Industry is very much focusing this period on improving and reforming the TVET system. Why? Not because we want to reform the educational system, but because the impact of that educational system is very much, we receive the outcome of the system. The industry, the companies, the private sector is receiving the outcome of that system. That's why we have very close cooperation with the Ministry of Education and Technical Education to do that together. For example, if we are talking about promoting and raising the awareness of the dual educational system, we're doing that because under the Federation, we have 19 industrial chambers in different manufacturing and non-manufacturing sectors. So we're raising the awareness of the members of these 19 chambers, which is more than 60,000 companies registered under this 19th chamber. So collecting the training opportunities, whether for the students or for even the job seekers, that's very important in the coming period. Concerning the social perception, actually the Ministry of Education has adopted a new model for dual education. It is called the Applied Technology School. The Applied Technology Schools is a school which is totally sponsored by the private sector, by a company or by a factory. So the businessman is taking this school, having all the needed changes, whether in the infrastructure, whether it's in the staff and the teachers of this school, providing training opportunities, whether it's in his factory or even in cooperation with other companies. Up to the moment, we reached 13 applied technology schools. In Egypt's Vision 2030, we need to reach 100 schools by 2030. So the Federation is taking the lead with Ministry of Education to promote the concept of applied technology school. It's very costly, I have to say. The running cost of having or sponsoring this school is very expensive. That's why we are targeting only 100 schools till 2030. But we're focusing more on promoting the dual educational system among the private sector. If we are talking about the governance problem, we are encouraging the chambers under the Federation to establish and develop what's so-called the Sectoral Skills Council. So we started in cooperation with the EBRD to establish the first sectoral skills council with the Chamber of Engineering Industry, and we started with 2 subsectors, the cables and the electronics, and to sense and to test how the private sector will be hosting and believing in this idea, because it's like the link between all the playing parties in this system, whether it's the governmental, the social society, and the private sector sitting on the same table to discuss what's needed on the labor market, what is provided by the educational system, how can we cope, how can we cooperate to fill the existing gaps. And we are availing all the local offices of the Federation to cooperate in this aspect and collect all the training opportunities. We have several local offices in different governorates, and in the coming period as well, we are going to cooperate with NGOs and social civil society to do that under the supervision of the Federation. I liked very much a word that Busaina raised during her presentation and discussion, which is invest in TVET. It's very important to invest in TVET, whether it's from the government, whether it's from the private sector, or even whether it's from international investors coming to Egypt. This is I have to mention here, for example, the successful experience of Siemens in Egypt of applying the solar project in Ain Sokhna, and the training academy, the huge training academy they implemented to train the TVET students and job seekers in this aspect. Promoting such initiative, it's very important. You mentioned, Busaina, that we don't want to conflict like the health sector, and so why not? If we're having an international investor coming to have like a training center with accredited certification, recognized one, I think it would be easy from the private sector perspective to have the graduates or the trainees of these training center, because the quality of the training he received is guaranteed. So I'm very much promoting investing in TVET from all parties, actually, because if we are talking TVET, we are not talking about educational system only. We're talking about improving the industry. We're talking about attracting foreign investment in countries. We're talking about minimizing the illegal migration to be to go and convert it to legal migration, qualified ones. So investing in TVET is very important. I would say the resilience, as I mentioned, is needed. The pandemic put us in a situation that we're still exploring so many things. So we're exploring how to apply educational system, whether it's online, virtual, and so on school educational system. We were in a situation to discover how we are dealing, even in companies and private sector, with that pandemic. Are we ready for that? What can be done in the coming period? Mustafa mentioned the crisis management. I would say problem solving, because not every time it will be a crisis. It could be a problem. It could be critical thinking. How to have the resilience to convert a problem into an opportunity. For example, the pandemic have shown that there are some sectors that were booming during the pandemic, other sectors were hit hard during the pandemic. So one of these sectors which were hit hard, for example, the textile sector. So how that brilliant first one who thought about converting his manufacturing from textile and ready-made garments into medical supplies, gowns and face masks and so on. So it's a matter of critical thinking, it's a matter of problem solving, and it's very much needed in the coming period. I think that's all from my side now. I'm very much looking forward to have more outcomes out of the study under this committee. I'm very much welcoming any questions to the panel from the audience. I think we have here a question. What is the future of the sectors that were hit hard by the pandemic? So Mustafa, Andre, would you like to take the lead and answer the question?
Very hard question. Ben, les secteurs qui ont été touchés, je pense que c'est les mêmes un peu partout dans le monde. Hein. Par contre, il y en a d'autres qui en ont vraiment bien bénéficié. Donc, je pense que globalement, il s'équilibre entre les deux, entre le secteur de la santé, de l'agroalimentaire et le secteur du textile, par exemple, ou le secteur de l'automobile et des composants électroniques, électriques. Il y a vraiment, je crois qu'il y a, ils vont encore attendre un petit peu de temps avant que ça s'arrange. Honnêtement, je ne sais pas, cette question, elle ne s'adresse pas à une organisation patronale, peut-être à un homme politique qui pourra mieux répondre que moi.
Je peux dire, si vous me permettez, des choses sur cette question. Parce que nous sommes ici au Portugal, d'un côté, en tant que pays, le tourisme, ça a été un des secteurs plus touchés. Le tourisme comme filière représente complètement plus de presque 12% d'exportation de services au Portugal. D'autre côté, un secteur dont mon organisation, la Fondation AIP, c'est un leader au Portugal, c'est le Miss Meetings, Exhibitions, Congresses. C'est un autre secteur qui est complètement fermé. Je comprends bien la question, il n'y a pas une réponse définitive, mais ce qu'ils sont en train de faire, c'est préparer, maintenant, attendre et préparer les réponses d'une forme proactive. On commence à ouvrir maintenant quelque chose, mais on serait vraiment que seulement avec les vaccins, l'immunité un peu plus collective, c'est possible d'ouvrir complètement. Il y a des façons de faire, mais on doit aussi réfléchir sur les modifications, sur les altérations qui on peut prognostiquer dans le futur, parce que on pense que les choses, que même après la pandémie, ne sera pas exactement le business as usual. Donc, il y a des changements qu'on doit comprendre maintenant dans ces secteurs, par exemple dans le secteur du tourisme et d'autre côté le secteur MIS, de foires, congrès et l'organisation d'autres événements qui sont dans le plus touchés dans cette crise. Et on pense que, par exemple, dans ce dernier secteur de MIS, le digital va changer surtout les filières, les targets, les cibles des événements avec moins de dimensions, moyennes dimensions. Les personnes, les organisations ont compris qu'on peut faire beaucoup de ces événements d'une forme digitale. C'est tout. Pour les événements de moyenne et grande dimension, on pense que ça se va développer et avec une pertinence, et de nouvelles exigences, notamment dans un système hybride, on fait une conjugation entre le digital et le présentiel. Ça, c'est une chose qui vient pour rester. Ce n'est pas le même du tourisme. Le tourisme, il reviendra parce qu'il reviendra avec quelques vitesses, ça dépend de surmonter les problèmes de la pandémie. Ça sera bon pour le Portugal, pour la Tunisie notamment, qui, je pense qu'il y a une situation pareille à nous ici au Portugal. Mais bon, il n'y a pas une réponse définitive pour ça, pour la question.
If I may add, may I add something, Shaima?
Yes, please, Rabah, go ahead.
In our context, you know that Lebanon is a country that relies on tourism and venues and nightlife. These sectors were the mainly hit. I'm speaking about hotels, restaurants, pubs, also retail shops. There is a very large number of small shops that were also hit, like in other countries. On the other hand, some sectors benefited out of the COVID crisis, like the local industries, especially those relating to
the food sector. We ate a lot during this pandemic.
The health sector, yeah, medical sectors, and you know, face masks and all of this, sanitizers. Also delivery, e-commerce, ICT related services, all of these prospered during the crisis. But bon, we hope that this pandemic will soon resolve and will come back to our normal life as soon as possible. Thank you.
Besides raising your hand, so yes, please.
J'ai voulu juste donner plus d'informations sur la question qui a été posée à Mostafa en ce qui concerne les secteurs les plus touchés dans des lectures sur la reconversion professionnelle. J'ai lu sur des exemples intéressants comme celui du secteur du tourisme, par exemple, qui est le secteur le plus touché un peu partout dans le monde, surtout dans les régions méditerranéennes comme le Liban, la Tunisie, le Maroc, etc. Et dans ces études-là, par exemple, ils ont pris l'exemple d'un employé du secteur du tourisme qui a entre 5 et 10 ans d'expérience. Il a déjà 60% des compétences requises pour devenir un technicien de data analysis ou data development, c'est-à-dire la reconversion de quelqu'un qui travaillait dans le secteur du tourisme requiert de lui une formation accélérée pour reconvertir son profil de quelqu'un qui était dans le secteur touristique pour devenir un employé du secteur de l'IT, par exemple. Donc, la reconversion professionnelle, je pense que c'est une solution pour pouvoir trouver une solution et réduire le nombre de personnes qui ont perdu leur emploi, et ils doivent vraiment se reconvertir et recycler leurs compétences. Et on a remarqué aussi que pendant la pandémie, des plateformes de formation comme Coursera et Udemy, ils ont vu que le nombre de personnes qui ont suivi des cours en ligne, et ce sont des gens qui ont perdu leur emploi, mais ils ont profité du temps du lockdown pour pouvoir se recycler et apprendre d'autres qualifications qui a permis à ces gens-là, après l'ouverture, d'aller voir d'autres emplois parce qu'ils ont perdu leur emploi. Et aussi, il y a des private businesses, il y a des SMEs, il y a des informal businesses qui ont pu se recycler et changer leur formation ou leur vocation à d'autres venues, à d'autres secteurs économiques plus avantageux. Donc, je pense que la solution est là. Et encore une fois, c'est la formation professionnelle qui peut aider et quand je dis au début que c'est cost effective and time wise, c'est rapide de recycler la personne, c'est vrai qu'en ce qui concerne l'infrastructure, ça coûte cher de mettre en place une technologie assez développée pour une formation à la fine pointe de la technologie, mais quand même cost effectiveness dans le sens où une formation en ligne, des ateliers intensifs, ça peut rapidement recycler des employés, surtout que ces employés-là ont déjà acquis des compétences tout au long de la vie, des compétences life skills, employability skills, customer service et des choses basiques, communication skills, interpersonal skills. Donc ça, c'est déjà acquis, mais il faut le recycler, l'améliorer, le reconvertir pour pouvoir s'engager dans un autre domaine. Donc ça, c'est pour un peu ajouter à la réponse de Mostafa, si Mostafa. The second comment is about investing in the private in the vocational education. This is really something that I dare to, but I always tend to not to emphasize on it because I don't want to be misunderstood, because the vocational education sector is supposed to support the need community, support the needy, support those who cannot make it to more advanced studies and advanced career paths. However, it is still a good venue to explore. But when we explore this venue, we have to be always careful about the social inclusion issue. We don't want, through private sector initiatives, private sector initiative, to exclude the need, to exclude minorities who will not be able to pay for the high tuition fees of the private vet. We've seen great examples in Jordan, for example, of Luminous Technology College, which is privately owned and offers market linkage, market-led diploma, and has 90% employability of its graduates. But who is going to pay for this tuition fees? Of course, it has to be through donor projects. It has to be through some kind of funding from the employers themselves. So we have to really build a model of investing in the vocational education, yes, but who is going to take care of the tuition fees? This is the key issue, because investing in the vocational education means investing in a very expensive structure, investing in high quality instructors, investing in employers' engagement, and this costs a lot of money, which means higher tuition fees. The Swiss model pays for this. The German model pays for this, the government. However, in the MENA region, if we are going to open up our country and receive foreign investors to invest in vocational education, we have to find a way, a cadre to monitor that very effectively, to make sure that we have a very good social inclusion. And this is something very important in MENA. Thank you.
You're right. You're right. You're very, very right on the social inclusion point. Just want to share concerning the last question. Actually, yes, the tourism sector was one of the biggest or the most affected sector by the pandemic, and the aviation sector as well, the oil and petroleum sector, the automotive sector. The thing is critical thinking, problem solving, and so on. I met a girl long time ago. She was from Latin America, I believe Argentina, and she was a university student. And I discovered that they taught her in school some techniques of how to be a hairdresser. And when I asked why, she said, because our educational system gives us more than a tool to use. If I didn't find a job with my university degree, I'll find the job with my vocational degree. That could be a very good solution that we might take into consideration to have more than a skill in different fields, maybe to overcome any predicted crisis or problem. That's what I wanted to share.
Pour confirmer ce que tu viens de dire, c'est cette pandémie a mis l'accent et a attiré l'attention de pas mal de chefs d'entreprise sur le facteur polyvalence de leurs employés. Et je pense que ça entre tout à fait dans ce que tu viens de dire, c'est-à-dire qu'un employé doit être capable d'assumer diverses tâches au sein de l'entreprise et peut-être être capable aussi de changer de site, de changer de région, d'être mobile. Et c'est un détail qui a attiré l'attention de pas mal d'entreprises actuellement. Donc, la polyvalence. Et à mon avis, le plus important maintenant, c'est d'être prêt au moment où la pandémie va s'arrêter à redémarrer la machine. Et ça, c'est pas gagné encore.
Thank you very much, our panelists, speakers, and our guests watching us via Facebook page, LinkedIn, and via Zoom as well. Special thanks to Mr. Rabih Sabra, Didier Gilbert, Busaina, Andre Mustafa, and special thanks for EBSOMED and BUSINESSMED team who facilitated everything to reach these results of a series of webinars concerning focusing and discussing the outcomes of several committees. Yesterday we had a webinar on education R&D on energy sector, and I think on Friday we're having the women issues on the Committee of Women Empowerment. Thank you for your time, thank you for your input, and see you, and I hope next time it will be face-to-face. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thanks. Bye.